The preservation of our founding ideals. Greetings, fellow citizens. I am Cyrus Walker, a true Jeffersonian, a Virginian plantation owner. My son wanted to experience the culture of the North through the large city of New York. However, I find the plays and parties of the city too novel for my taste, and I preferred to come here to hear Mr. Calhoun speak and participate in this literary forum as moderated by Charles Dickens, as the issue of slavery feels very important to me, being a slaveholder myself. Politically, I consider myself a subscriber to Jeffersonian ideology, as I believe in personal freedoms as well as a small governing elite who can better serve the needs of all the people of the United States. On the topic of slavery, I believe that slaves are most certainly people. However, I believe, as the late Thomas Jefferson did, that it is in the best interest of the slaves to remain enslaved, as to prevent a large-scale race rebellion. As long as the slaves remain so, our economic and social structure will be preserved. The abolishment of slavery is much too radical an idea, as doing so would break the very foundations of economics in our nation. Prices would rise, wages would fall, and the standard of living for many would decrease. At least in slavery, slaves are guaranteed shelter, food, and clothing, the most basic provisions of life. With their inexperience in controlling every aspect of their personal finances and jobs, it is clearly beneficial for them to remain enslaved with these provisions provided for them by more capable white slaveholders. The relation between slaves and their masters is hardly different from what every family accepts. As George W. Freeman described in The Rights and Duties of Slaveholders, the father, as the head of the family, would of course direct and command the labors of his children, and as the number of these increased and the operations of the household became, in consequence, expanded, his time would be more and more occupied in planning and superintending the labors of the rest, until in process of time he would find it essential to the welfare of the whole that he should withdraw entirely from manual toil, and devote himself exclusively to cares and labors of a different kind. It is universally known that the father should hold absolute power over his sons and daughters and wife. He knows how best to care and nurture his sons, to take care of them. He must punish them with physical force when they have done wrong. Slaves are no different. Although a father forces his sons to do harsh labor, he knows it is for their own good, even if they cannot comprehend it, and complain about their toil. Likewise, the slave begs for freedom, but knows not of the extreme difficulties of which freedom entails. As Jefferson believed, slaves, though people, still remain property. While it was not necessarily fair or equal for the slaves, it would be far better for them to remain slaves for the good of the society, to prevent the collapse of the nation. It is our moral duty to keep the slaves enslaved in order to preserve societal order. Although this course of action may not be the most equal, it is by far the most practical. From my experiences, the slaves are treated quite fairly, as they are ensured provisions for life as long as they maintain a strong work ethic, same as any free man enjoys, but with a stronger guarantee. It is not as though the poor whites or freed blacks own much more than a slave does, and these men must worry that their incomes will disappear, while the slave knows his is guaranteed. The sons are almost no more free than the slaves. My family has remained confined to our single farm for generations. Still today I live with all my brothers on our farm, which we work together with the sons and daughters of our father's slaves. We are every bit as enslaved to this farm through the tradition of the family as our slaves are. I believe, as Jefferson wrote in his Notes on the State of Virginia, that deep-rooted prejudices entertained by the whites, 10,000 recollections by the blacks of the injuries they have sustained, new provocations, the real distinctions which nature has made, and many other circumstances will divide us into parties, and produce convulsions which will probably never end but in the extermination of one or the other race. To these objections, which are political, may be added others which are physical and moral. It is better that the blacks and whites stay separate, keep their cultures separate, and keep their societal roles separate. As whites are much more civilized, they are more suited for schooling, for the sophisticated jobs of the world, while blacks have been accustomed to hard labor under the heat of the sun for generations. Our differences lead us to fulfill different roles in society as God intended. In reference to God, our very Bible constantly professes the use of slavery. Ephesians 6:5 instructs us, "Slaves, obey your earthly masters with deep respect and fear. Serve them as sincerely as you would serve Christ." It is the Christian duty of the slave to serve his Christian master, for his efforts continue to help spread the word of Christ. Enslavement is simply a natural occurrence of the world, as common in human nature as war or even worship. Since the beginning of time, we have observed slaves and slaveholders in mutual existence, as we may forever, as it would take too radical of a change to human nature itself to reject this fundamental institution of slavery. I recently acquired and read through a copy of the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, and I must say that I believe many of his stories described events which were by no means the normal experience of a slave. As Mr. Douglass described, the majority of his owners treated him with respect and very few whippings. It was merely with Mr. Covey where he received harsh punishments, which even ceased later. This was only one experience of many for Douglass, and only a handful of slaves were even sent to Covey. Based on this, I believe that Douglass had the unfortunate luck of receiving the worst end of slavery, but this experience is far from what is expected from slaveholders, and is much crueler than what the average slave must live through in a lifetime. I would like to apologize to Douglass for this treatment on behalf of slave owners, but I urge you all to consider that this is most definitely not what slavery entails, that it is a much kinder institution than Douglass's story suggests. Thank you.